Obviously, War Culture is part of Future Overall, where the Golden Joysticks are coming up in a few weeks. And we got sent the Ultimate Game of the Year list, including various other nominations for different video game studios, etc., that are going to be able to be voted on. There's already been over 10 million votes, apparently. The link's down in the description, and you can vote until Friday, November 8th. Also, the event is hosted by, I was going to say, my friend Ben Starr. Someday he'll reply to my messages. He'll be in there someday. We'll get him on the podcast. But yeah, overall, we have various categories to break down, and it's a nice, fun thing to debate about. The first category is Ultimate Game of the Year. I'll read out the nominations, and we'll just see where the conversations go, and then we have some other categories as well. Ultimate Game of the Year: Animal Well, Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Dragon Age: The Veilguard, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Helldivers 2, Metaphor Refantazio, Satisfactory, Silent Hill 2, and Tekken 8.
Call of Duty's in there, but not Dragon's Dogma 2.
No, and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth isn't in there either.
Interesting.
So not to have a go at our overlords, but they've missed two obvious picks there.
Well, I'm sure towards the end of this, we'll get into the omissions that we would have liked to have seen out of that list, which I do think is quite strong. For me, gut feeling, I like a lot of those games. I think it's Astrobot. I think it is Astrobot, and I think it's because there is a take that I do actually sympathize with, that it is just a lot of corporate branding. It's selling you potentially a machine that you already own. It is in a year that has been defined by like layoffs and companies acting a little bit dodgy. It feels, I think, sometimes a little bit jarring to then be very celebratory in a potentially soulless way about those companies. But I don't think Astrobot is soulless. I think it has so much soul. I think it has so much heart. I think it is doing it from a genuine place. I think the love that it has for the characters and the consoles and the history that it's referencing, it does not come across as cynical. For me personally, it does not come across as artificial or kind of forced in a way that I do think something like Sony's All-Stars did back in the day.
Yes.
This one, just like the other Astrobot games, even Astro's Playroom, which you can get that on PlayStation 5, that's already installed, I think. They're just like a real love letter to the history of PlayStation. And that is one thing, but the other thing is that it's just a kick-ass platformer in its own right. It is so full of joy. It feels silky smooth. I think the levels themselves balance difficulty and pure fun and experimentation pretty perfectly. Some of my levels of the entire year are in this thing. I'm thinking about that one where you go very, very small and you can run around the level that you've just gone through, and everything is, obviously huge, and it just completely changes the player space. It's so inventive with that stuff. And then you throw in, a great use of the DualSense, a killer soundtrack. I mean, that God of War level with the song is just gonna, again, another level of the year. It just is the full package in the way that I think Astrobot has been for a while, but it jumping from VR to the main console, and it apparently selling really well. I just think this is a crowd pleaser for everyone. I know I'm rambling on, but I've talked to people older than me at literally coffee shops around the corner from us, shout out Good Brews, about how the people there and their kids are looking forward to playing it, and you've got like an older fella and you've got his young kid, and they're both kind of vying for who gets to play Astrobot, and I just think that's sick, man. It's kind of has that unifying edge to it, and it's just, no matter how old you are, I think it's just a great feeling game to play.
Yeah, man. It's just a perfect slice of, like you said, it's a perfect slice of gaming. 3D platformers are one of the most vestiged genres you can get. It's why so many of us got into gaming in the first place, whether that was, Crash, Banjo, or Spyro, or whatever. And it's been so long since there's been a really stellar 3D platformer. Like, obviously, with the Crash remakes, but a new one. Like, it's something else that's really going to stand out. You had a little slice of it in 2020 with the game that came with the PS5. But I'm going to go a bit left field. Yeah, Astro's a great shout. I think that'll be a lot of people's pick just because it's so perfect. I'm going to throw Balatro in.
Oh, you might. Yeah.
I just, we're talking about games that are, pristine, absolutely tweaked until they're just perfect Clockwork Mechanism titles. Balatro is a phenomenal game, obviously based around poker, but it's like a roguelike. So many different options in terms of how you're building your decks, but then you've got all these other wider, gaming tropes that you're bringing in, bosses that are represented as blinds, trying to get certain amounts of points, building your different deck synergies, and it doesn't really make sense until you play it, just how well made it is.
Yeah.
And I'm not really a roguelike guy. I do get sick of doing runs over and over again, but this doesn't feel like I'm losing progress. It does feel like it's like, okay, I just unlocked this new card, I just unlocked this new way of thinking, and you're bringing in this like hybrid of like, I don't play much poker in real life, but I know enough to play, and it's like you're kind of bringing that in. And then alongside, like I said, all the wider stuff and a lot of the multipliers and different special cards that you get are really fun. I've played an absolute ton of Balatro. And I know that they finally put it out on mobile, which is like got the conversation going on like, well, I have no free time left anymore then, because I'm just going to play a couple more games of Balatro. So I have a feeling it might be that.
I know as well, like that's a big deal for you, I think, because I know how much you loved Astrobot, and I know how much joy that gave you, and I know how much you enjoyed some of the other games on this list that I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Sorry, I'll be really clear. I prefer Astrobot overall. I think Balatro might take it.
Okay.
Just in terms of the feeling. I also, if we're talking about the feeling of the awards, I think Final Fantasy VII Rebirth might take it, and I hated that thing.
Interesting. I think Balatro might get it, you know. For a little while, I thought maybe Animal Well, which I really enjoyed, but Balatro is the one where I just see everyone talking about it. I've not played it myself, but I know how much you love it. You see everyone who's played that game just has nothing bad to say about it. It feels inventive. It feels like it was the game of the moment. It has that kind of underdog spirit going for it. I think if you compare it to something like, you know, an Astrobot or whatever, which is, you know, to its benefit, like big business. It's like a big company. I think if you root for it, especially again in this year, if you root for that underdog, to me it is something like a Balatro or something like an Animal Well.
Good mix of titles, to be honest. Like a nice mix of different budgets, different indie stuff. I was going to say Tekken 8 was my game of the year for a very, very long time. That game has only suffered over and over again.
Such a shame.
Over monetizing, charging separately for one arena. The way that like I'm fine with big dumb anime BS, so I was fine with the way that they brought Heihachi back, but the vast majority of the fandom were not. And the way that they then charged for Heihachi's arena, it was like an extra £3 or whatever, sucked even outside of the battle pass, I think. But yeah, the way that they've over-monetized it, the way that they put all those monetization systems in after the launch period, after the review period, is just scummy. Like, there's a whole thing going on with the way that Namco have handled Tekken, and you've even got, you know, the godfather of Tekken, Katsuhiro Harada, getting out there on Twitter to address it, put statements out, try and quell the flames, deleting some of his posts, being very honest about where he is in between Big Corpo and the game, and doing what he can. And it just feels like, you know, there was an opportunity to monetize it from the top down, and they've gone a bit too far with it, like simple as. And so, like, it's a weird thing, because when we have these conversations, are we talking about the version of the game that existed, that got reviewed, that like a wider audience potentially played, versus the long tail, the fandom that'll stick around, or are we talking about the version of the game that exists right now? The latter is where I would go, because it's the one you're going to pick up if you're going to get into it.
It's interesting.
It's a shame, because it's like I had a phenomenal time with Tekken 8, and every time I play it, I can ignore a lot of the monetization, but it is in there. And so, like, yeah, I absolutely love Tekken 8. I think it's a phenomenal game at the core, but the wider attitude around it, the sort of betrayal of consumer trust and betrayal of fan trust needs to be called out. And I think that they will hopefully eventually do right by the fans, because at the minute it's not doing very well.
It's very valid, that, isn't it? I think we're definitely in an era, well into the era of games. Obviously, they've always evolved since launch, you know, with patches or whatever, but now it feels like the game that you can play at launch versus the game that's available for people to play when these awards come out can be so vastly different, whether it's a single-player title or whether it's a multiplayer title. Scott Hilford, I saw last night that Star Wars Outlaws, a game that released in August, has a new creative director. What is that about? What is going on? What are we doing with video games right now?
What's Ubisoft doing?
I don't know, man.
This is a whole separate thing.
But it certainly is. No doubt we'll do the 100th podcast on Ubisoft that we've done this year at some point.
Outlaws, it's not one of the categories that we're going to cover, because there are very many categories, but we're not covering the one that was Best Audio Design, which is one of the only categories that Star Wars Outlaws is nominated for. I love my time with Outlaws. I really, really like that game, but it's a shame that it's not in the Ultimate Game of the Year conversation. Like, I would put it up. If like the likes of Black Myth Wukong and Dragon Age are in there, then Star Wars Outlaws should be in there too.
No. Yeah. And I liked, as we know,
Star Wars Outlaws better than Animal Well?
No, it
better than Animal Well.
He did.
Yeah.
You're just wrong. You're just wrong.
No. Oh, you've got to finish the game and then find out what the rest of the game is. Oh, it's a fun secret.
Listen, I'm not going to fight you over this, because I think Outlaws is good. I just think, for me, For me, there'd be something wrong with this year if it was like in a real Game of the Year contention. I think it would be indicative of the rest of the releases not being quite having that cutting edge if this was in alongside, for me, Astrobot and what have you. But
True.
even Call of Duty Black Ops 6, man, I think that is kind of the full package in a way that Outlaws maybe is not. That's not to say there isn't anything good about Outlaws. Please watch our spoiler cast if you want to, where we go in total depth on it. That said, thinking about the other titles on here, Silent Hill 2, I know we've talked about this to death, and I know you haven't played it, but that is definitely a contender for me. I think it maybe it lacks the mass appeal and kind of extra spark that something like a Balatro or an Astrobot does have. But for me personally, if I was going entirely subjective, just talking about my favorites, that would rival Astrobot, I think, for a place at the very, very top. I loved it. Animal Well as well. Like I said, it's a game that I eventually bounced off because I was kind of too dumb to finish it. It was too demanding of me.
It's obtuse as hell, man.
That's it, man. I kind of respect that we still have a sort of field for those kind of games where literally the way that game is designed, if you don't know, it's a Metroidvania with I think 3 or 4 layers, as the developer calls them. So you can finish the first layer, which is just getting through the game and hitting credits, and then you go back into the game world, you kind of peel back another layer and look for secrets that get you yet another ending, and then you have a final layer that essentially can't be completed without the community aspect and going online and sharing stories. And I like that essentially it's more or less kind of like 3 games in one.
Yeah.
And the further you dig into it, like the more help you kind of do need, the more obtuse it does become. I personally like that. I think it's cool. I like games where you don't get to see everything and they can kind of live as a bigger thing. Scott's pulling a face.
I'm doing a little face. I meant in terms of like, I love that stuff exists, but I'm going to need some indicator that there's something else there. Because in Animal World's case, I did the first layer and then I was like, okay, cool, now what? And the game's just like, well, somewhere in the map is something else that if you piece together and decipher the code, you might figure out a bit more. And I'm like, who has the time? It ain't me.
I think it's got a bit more direction than that. Like, it does have a counter for things that you can find. There are secrets left over that you probably encountered when you hit the first credit sequence that might encourage you to go back out and search for more of those, or areas that were locked off. I think it's a little bit more directed than that. I don't think it completely just kicks you in the backside and says, get on with it. But it is obtuse. I can't deny that.
Yeah.
A lot of people won't see the entirety of the thing. I haven't seen the entirety of the thing, but I think it was a real surprise when it dropped earlier this year.
I think, and it's a callback to like 70s, like Atari's Adventure, where it's like, actually you need to go like up off the screen and then right, like you need to figure out this path with nothing. And it's like, that is only going to reward like 20 people on Earth, but they'll have the best experience of all time. And that is worth celebrating. I'm leaning into my subjectivities in terms of just saying that, I would have appreciated a little bit more of a nod, because once you know that material is in there, but you're scratching at the surface trying to find it, at some point you just end up giving up. It's telling that neither of us got to those other levels. Layers, sorry. But also, like I said, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I just wanted to mention that because I couldn't stand the way that they changed the story. Everything else is a spoiler cast, and I think videos on that as well. But that is the one game that all year long just keeps getting mentioned as Game of the Year. Every comment section, whether it's the joysticks or the Game Awards, the Jeff Keighley tweet, whatever, it's always Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And that could be algorithmic on my part, but I've seen it across so many websites and so many comment sections that I think it does have the community vote. And I think because the joysticks are audience voted, I just have a feeling that Rebirth will take it. I just wonder how that'll go down. What do you think of it being Game of the Year?
I think Rebirth, for me, and I'm not as big of a Final Fantasy fan as you, Rebirth for me has Game of the Year moments in it. It has incredibly high highs for me personally. I just think it's inconsistent, and it's more consistent than the original remake. I had a better overall time with it, but there are still lulls, there are still bits of content and side missions that I think aren't really needed and just do feel like kind of boring padding. But I love the performances. I do really enjoy the story. I think it's so incredibly well directed. I think the action is great. I do think it's a great recommendable game. It just, at this point, when we're talking about Game of the Year, we're kind of splitting hairs. And for me, it doesn't reach that sort of high 9 out of 10 threshold where I can recommend it without using a but, without saying, oh, you'll like it, but be wary of this part of the game, this part of the game. I mean, I myself, while I did most of the main side missions, like the collectibles and the repeated activities, I just mostly ignored those. So I don't think I can fully make a shout for a game of the year where I would advise you to skip some of the content.
I was going to say, like you said, it has some game of the year quality moments. The overall bar of production is sky high, but to me, it has some of the worst moments of the year as well. Like that stupid mission with the chickens with the little box, and I'm like, come on, you've got to come back to the farm. What's that? What are we doing as a populace? Why did you spend the time? Just save the money and don't put it in. The stealth sections with the chocobos, horrific. Yeah. There's the final boss, the fact that Sephiroth can kill you like in a second after that massive charge up window. You gotta rewatch the cutscenes, rewatch it all again. F that.
I mean, the chickens, I didn't mind, right? I mean, I did. I thought it was infuriating, but I almost treated it as a joke on myself. Like I was like, oh, you got me. You got me good, Square
That'd be fine if it didn't go on for 10 minutes.
No, here's the thing, though. Like that's at least a side mission, right? What I couldn't get on board with was that awful Cat Sith.
Catchy.
No, Cat Sith.
You're Kate Sith. If you mean that's the point. That's the side that you have.
Entirely.
Just make a new one.
There's that awful Kate Sith level where you are throwing around boxes, because that is a main mission. That's something you have to get through.
I blanked that from my mind.
That was a moment where I thought, oh, we have devolved back into the remake style inconsistencies of why are you making me do this?
Hoovering up the Mako as well. Just when you've got the blueprint right there and you deviate so much into, and even I don't mind the deviation, but to then code such tedious BS.
Yes.
Like, God.
But all worth it because I get to hang out with my pals on the beach.
I felt like one bit of the game.
I extended that quite a lot.
More beach stuff. We will move on from this category because there are other ones. I just lastly want to shout out Metaphor Refantazio as another one that I think might take it. However, I wonder how many people have actually got around to playing it because it did release in a packed October window. Yeah. And it will have only been about a month from the game's release to when the awards are actually on. I think on the 27th of November, they're near the end of November. But Metaphor, and I haven't finished it, the game's like 80 hours long, but I've put about 15, 20 into it. Just a phenomenal mix of like every medium that the Atlas or / the Persona team do so well. I know it's a different team, but you've got like anime cutscenes and the evolution of the way they approach turn-based combat, where like if there's a bunch of low-level enemies on the map, you just hack and slash your way through them. It's a hack and slash game, and then you can choose to go into turn-based combat for bigger enemies or whatever. Thinking like that, thinking like progressively towards a genre that is just so old at this point, and like having get a bit of a resurgence, whether that's something like Alive or Infinite Wealth or whatever, like them coming in there, splitting off from Atlas to do a different franchise, which has a lot of Persona DNA in it. You're still awakening a Persona, it just has a different name. But I think it plays so well, and the story's so layered. Like I think what a lot of people want from something like Dragon Age the Veil God story-wise or thematics-wise is in Metaphor Refantazio, where it's exploring equality, racial injustices, etc. That stuff is baked into Metaphor in a way that, from at least the way the Dragon Age fandom speaks, was in the older Dragon Age games a little bit more, or a little bit faster than it is in Veil God, because Veil God does get there, but it takes time. But yeah, I just want to shout out Metaphor because I think that thing is pristine as hell, and I think when you play Metaphor or you see it be played, it's like there's a level of production there. There's so much flair to it. That is a great extension of what Persona 5 did. And if you like the way that game looked, just on the menus, everything, it's a bit of it is in Persona 3's remake as well. Just such a visual flair to it. It's so cool. So that's the game of the year stuff.
I think something like that, like Metaphor or Balatro, or even an Animal Well, I think they might fare a little bit better at the Game Awards, like you said, with it being more a community-focused thing. The the gaming joysticks, the golden joysticks. It's going to be interesting to see. I can't say any words. It's going to be interesting to catch how that shakes out, I think. But it's going to be interesting either way. I missed all of the award seasons last year, so I'm excited to be back here and seeing what's got Tilford.
We'll quickly touch on Best Game Adaptation because we know what this is going to be. It's between Borderlands, Fallout, Halo Season 2, Knuckles, Like a Dragon Yakuza, and Tomb Raider The Legend of Lara Croft. It will be Fallout.
It'll be Fallout, 100%.
It will be Fallout.
That's the only one of those projects, I think, that like people even like.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a great year for adaptations, put it that way. If you're nominating Borderlands, which we did so many videos on, and is just bad, then I think something's gone a little bit
horribly wrong. Well, Borderlands was abysmal. One of the most viewed sets of videos that we did, just literally saying what an absolute mess it was. The Knuckles show is mostly I forget the name of the actor, but the guy that plays Robotnik's right-hand man. It's mostly about him because obviously the TV show, the budget's not going to be there to animate Knuckles throughout the entire episode. So Knuckles is barely in his own show.
Interesting.
Halo got the Halo show cancelled.
Yep.
So season 2 didn't work very well. Like a Dragon Yakuza is a completely different take on the source material, which some people quite like. I'm too much of a stick in the mud for how things should feel for that franchise that I just bounced off it. And Tomb Raider completely wastes Haley Atwell as Lara Croft. She's a phenomenal casting, and the show just did not bring it together. I think it'll be Fallout. This next one is a fun category, though. Best lead performer. Cody Christian as Cloud Strife in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Kaiji Tang as Ichiban Kasuga in Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Humbly Gonzalez as Kay Vess in Star Wars Outlaws. Luke Roberts as James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2. Melina Jurgens as Senua in Senua's Saga Hellblade 2. And Sonequa Martin Green as Alvilda in Asgard's Wrath 2.
Well, I've not played Asgard's Wrath 2.
Me too.
Though it being Sonequa Martin Green makes me excited about that because I do like her.
Okay, I didn't know who that was.
However, I think I'm going to go, perhaps not a surprise because I have banged on about it so much, but Luke Roberts for James Sunderland in Silent Hill 2. I think that performance is great, and it's great because it's not flashy. It's not overly emotive. It's very, very subtle. James gets a few scenes to really kind of show an emotional range, but mostly it's quite a stoic, quite a understated performance, but one which conveys, I think, so much soul and humanity to the character and so many layers to the character. I think the voice performance combined with the facial animation and the mocap, just that character is saying a lot with little, whether that's like a few sentences or a couple of eye movements when someone else is talking. It is a real nuanced performance, I think, and that might make it a little bit overshadowed, but I was shocked at how much I liked all the performances in that game, and he is definitely a standout.
I'm so curious how this is going to go because a lot of people love Cody Christian's Cloud Strife, like the new version of Cloud, how sort of tortured and damaged he is and how much they're playing on the wider story. Like there's revelations that are yet to come kind of thing in terms of why he's like that and just how completely tormented he is. I appreciate that. I think for me, I kind of want to go with Kaiji Tang, mainly because Kasuga is a really over-the-top character in Yakuza 7 and then in Infinite Wealth. But there are some really good emotional beats in there. And I won't do spoilers for the game because it's massively long and I have to assume a lot of people won't have necessarily got through all of it. But the way that story goes and some of the emotional beats that need to be landed on, there is a range there that I didn't expect. And it's not like, Yakuza 7 didn't have bits like that either. But there's some really good stuff in there. And I think it would be awesome if he got it. But it's a really good contested group. I think Melina Jurgens is a great shout as Senua, but to a degree, it's just more Senua.
Yeah.
And that's a shame because there is like an incredible amount of emotion there. But I mean, I hated Hellblade too, so I'm not going to pretend that I had a great time with that game.
Yes.
But and I thought that whole game was just sort of like the original, but like distilled down to almost a visual tech demo.
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because I don't want to be overly critical of that performance because I do think it is still good. I just think, I don't know, it felt a little bit more special in the original game. And I think it's not even Melissa Jurgens' fault, but I think the actors that she's working with in Hellblade 2 sometimes outshine her for my money anyway. And I don't know whether that's because of the writing or the direction this time around. Like you said, it is kind of covering similar beats, it is doing similar things, and maybe I just kind of appreciated the freshness that the other performances brought to the table. But yeah, it's definitely a game. I'm only criticizing it because it's a game full of great performances, and I guess that's a good problem to have for a title anyway. Yeah,
I think I have a gut feeling that because who do you think's actually going to win this? Like in terms of where it'll go for the awards, I have a feeling it might actually be Luke Roberts for James Sunderland.
I don't know. It is a tough one. I think. I think it's a toss-up. I think it could be Cloud, the guy who plays Cloud.
Cody Christensen.
Cody Christensen.
Cody Christensen.
Cody Christian. I think maybe Cloud because I do think that is also a great performance that is maintained across like 80 hours of that game. And yeah, I think honestly, I know we're not doing the other categories, but all of the performances in Rebirth, I really enjoy. I think. Considering I don't have any affinity for the original characters because I didn't play that game, I think it's testament to how well the new voice performers have performed that I feel connected to them all.
Yeah.
I feel like despite the situations that they're put in, a lot of the dialogue comes across, even if it is overblown and very anime-esque at times, like it comes across again with a lot of that humanity to it. It never feels like a caricature of itself. It never really feels like they're playing into archetypes. It always feels like, oh, that's Aerith, that is Tifa, that is Cloud, etc.
Seven's always been like one of the best like parties, one of the best groupings of characters. Like it will be hard to, you'd have to intentionally do it badly. Like that mix of those personalities just works so well. I just remembered that what they did to Red 13, and it's in the original more so in the Japanese dialogue, which didn't make its way to the West as much. But like the complete 180 on his character, I hated.
Yeah.
But I get that it is in the original to a degree. But yeah, overall though, like there's a chance that like 7 just feels like it might just take everything. Like it might be the 7 sweep, even though it's not a sweep that I'm on board with. But still.
Do you think there's anything in the golden joysticks, especially like a lot of the games that we're talking about? PlayStation exclusives or PlayStation and PC? Do you think that's going to impact them? Because, you know, Square Enix has talked about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth underperforming, and I wonder if it went to more consoles or a bigger market, like would it have a better chance? Would it have a worse chance? I don't know. I have no answers for that. I just find it interesting in terms of the current crop that we have this year.
No, definitely, man. Yeah, it definitely would. I mean, you've got an audience voted set of awards. There's a whole third of if you just pie charted it and made it thirds, you've got 2/3 of the overall console base who assumedly aren't voting. You know, diehard Nintendo fans, diehard Xbox fans who haven't been able to get on board with the Final Fantasy games or whatever. Yeah, I think that massively impacts. We've got Studio of the Year between 11-Bit Studios, Arrowhead Game Studios, Capcom, Digital Eclipse, my boys, Team Asobi, and Visual Concepts.
To me, this is between two.
Yeah.
It's between Capcom and it's between, I've forgotten their name, 11-Bit Studios.
11-Bit Studios, yeah.
I was going to call them Team 11, but that's Team 13.
That's so funny. I'm going between Digital Eclipse and Team Asobi.
Yeah, okay.
All Arrowheads for Helldivers.
I'll put my argument forward, and I'm excited to hear yours.
Uh-huh.
Capcom, I was wondering actually what they released this year, but when I looked it up, they've had a really strong year. They had your beloved Kinitsugami, that needs more love. They had Dragon's Dogma 2, and they had Dead Rising, the deluxe remaster. And I think those are 3 very strong games, 3 very different games, hitting a bunch of different genres, all hitting a high level of quality. You've got like the big hitters, like a big sequel, a big budget RPG like Dragon's Dogma, and then you've got Kinitsugami, and I always forget the final word of that title. What is it? Kinitsugami.
Path of the Goddess.
Path of the Goddess. And you've got stuff like that. So I think those are 3 great games, on top of the stuff that they have announced, like Monster Hunter, which is coming imminently, on top of the stuff that they released last year, or at least the end of last year, with Resident Evil 4 and then Separate Ways, and then the Resident Evil 4 VR game, they have released a lot of great titles. However, 11-Bit Studios have also released 3 absolutely cracking indies this year, and if you don't know what they are Frostpunk 2, Indica, and the Thaumaturge, which isn't out yet on console. It's out on PC, I think. And I'm excited to play that. But based on the other 2, I just think that's a really strong selection as well. You know, and again, in an era where we are relying on, I think, indies more than ever to deliver those like really impactful stories or really impactful games. I think something like Indica should be celebrated in this year.
Yeah,
and
massively.
Frostpunk 2, again, a continuation of something that was already nicely established as a sort of critical darling and has, you know, expanded upon that idea. I think I would like to see either of them get it. Maybe 11-Bit, just because it has that kind of more underdog edge. And I think that Capcom, while this is a great year for them, they've kind of had better years recently, I think, maybe.
My thing overall is that looking at this swath of studios, it's so restorative as to the health of the industry overall. In terms of every single studio here are doing different things. And so, I mean, my shout goes to Digital Eclipse in terms of my personal pick. I think the way that they are approaching gaming history is not only essential for the medium, for the art form, like getting back in touch with those original teams when you're remastering their titles and doing the interviews and saying, hey, do you guys actually want to touch up some of these levels yourselves and apply certain lessons to those levels and coding that maybe you learned over the years. There's something so special about that. And then they've been able to do their own titles, like they're doing the Power Rangers upcoming beat 'em up lineup that's coming out.
Yeah.
But then you do have these, I mean, they're behind the Atari 50 collection, various other Atari remasters as well. But then they're telling stories like Llama Soft, which is like the whole story of Jeff Minter, and his various games, Tempest and things like that. And they're doing Tetris Forever next month, and it's like talking to the original teams, the story of Tetris, and there's like 8 different versions of Tetris or whatever. It's not going to be for everybody in terms of like, we're going back so far kind of thing. But these are like the seeds of the industry that blossomed entire forests. And it's like, we've never had these stories and we've never had them done so well. And the emulation, the remaster side of it is so spot on. Whether that's adding save states or just cleaning up the visuals or whatever it is. And Digital Eclipse, like I said, the work that they're putting in, they go right alongside Night Dive, who are about to re-release the remaster of The Thing. And Night Dive are doing more stuff like the 3D games kind of thing.
Yeah.
But they're both owned by Atari. Like Atari's whole thing seems to be like, let's respect the history and do it right. And I just love that. I think that's really important for the industry. But also Arrowhead, like to roll with as many punches as they were given. They doled a good few out when Helldivers 2 first launched. It was like, look at this game. It just dominated for like a fortnight. And then it felt like after that, they dropped right off. They tweaked it a little bit too much. They had to change all their plans. They had to rehire and go bigger because the game was received so well. And then all the player base dropped off. They kind of overtuned it a little bit too much. And then you had Johan Palstad, say, look, I'm changing my role. Like, I think he was the creative director, and he went back into more of a coding role, or to be in charge of the teams anyway. And across the last, let's say, 2 months, they've saved it again. And it's like, hell, I feel like they've really gone through a trial by fire of like what it's like when a small indie style game blows up. How do you deal with that? How do you manage a community? How do you manage expectations? Take the feedback on board, but not lose the essence of what the game was. And I think that's a masterclass in being able to roll with all that stuff.
Yeah.
And the fact that Helldivers 2 is back up to like, it's got this insane play base and it's fun again and whatever. Like I think it probably will go to Capcom because, and they also represent AAA being able to do AAA games and smaller games. Like they themselves are also what should be the future of the industry.
Yeah.
So I think that's all really, really important. And my God, sorry, but Team Asobi as well.
Oh God, yeah,
Like,
we haven't even talked.
They for the longest time were just this sort of like tech studio that worked on like DualSense functionality and things like that. Like you can thank Team Asobi for why something like Spider-Man 2 feels so good on PS5. And then for them to be able to do a game like and do it like so well with Astrobot, and then put all that expertise into why every level and power up feels so good. There's a part of me that just wants to celebrate them, like you know, and they're made up of Studio Japan and like old titles like Ape Escape and like various other things. Like blanking on the amount of different titles that they represent.
Gravity Rush maybe as well.
Yeah, Gravity Rush. What's the thing that I'm blanking on?
You said Blood Demon.
What's the one when you become little fellas and there's loads of them all come together and there's a level of it in Astrobot and you're bouncing around everywhere?
What is that?
I cannot remember the goddamn name.
No, it's not.
It begins with L. But you've got all that stuff in there as well. There's just a lot of legacy in that studio, and it's been so long since they've been able to show it off. And so, again, it means a lot to the industry that Team Asobi have done Astrobot. It was received so well, and it did so well. So I could go with any of them. I think I'd probably just join you on Capcom.
You know what?
Even though my personal pick is Digital Eclipse.
I don't know why I'm doing this. There's no reason to go in on Team Asobi, but the reason I would maybe not give it to them.
Just sharpening the knife. I don't need to put the. I'm going to do it.
I'm going to do it anyway, though. Hey, why not? This is me and you, and it's a podcast, and we're just shooting the crap, aren't we? But Team Asobi, again, it's my VR grudge that I have against them, and it's just the fact that yes, Astrobot is probably the best thing they've ever done.
Yes,
but it to me, it's like it's an iteration on an idea that has already been done a few times now.
Right.
You know, whether that's the actual fully fledged rescue mission in VR, which is where a lot of the ideas in the current Astrobot and a lot of the mechanics were fully established, or whether it was in Astro's Playroom, or whether it was in like Astro's debut in the PS5. We've had a lot of Astro, you know, and it's great that it's finally come to this wider audience. But because it is iterative in that way, that's the only reason why I would maybe not shout them out as studio of this year specifically. But I do also agree with you that they definitely deserve their flowers, especially considering the heritage of Japan studio that, you know, obviously this is indebted to. So I wouldn't hate it if they got studio of the year, but I think the other studios that we've mentioned and that you've mentioned just kind of this year have that something extra, perhaps.
Yeah, man, definitely. Also, Loco Roco was the title that I could not think of because I was getting it mixed up with Patapon, and there was a whole era on the PSP where you got that sort of revitalization of early PS2 stuff that I absolutely love, and I think a lot of that energy is in Team Asobi and is in Astrobot. Next category is Best Storytelling, and I'll confess I haven't played the first, I haven't played the first two of these or the last one, but the candidates are 1000X Resist, Emio, The Smiling Man, Famicom Detective Club, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and Tactical Breach Wizards.
I'm not going to lie, I'm going to have to sit this one out. I've not played the majority of those. I feel, even though I played more games than ever this year, I was saying to you before we started recording, in some of these categories, I'm just like, have I played anything? You know, what's going on?
The industry's bigger than ever.
It is, 100%. I just, it's funny. I want to play these games now because the ones that I had pegged for best storytelling this year haven't necessarily showed up here, which I think is interesting.
No, I think it's a weird, like, on its face, it's a weird set of titles for a best storytelling category. I know the name Tactical Breach Wizards, but in terms of the stuff that I have played, that's mainly Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. From them, the sheer breadth of what happens, the level of storytelling, the emotional investment, I would go Infinite Wealth.
Yeah.
But Emio the Smiling Man is the game that Nintendo teased as like their first sort of horror thing. Then it was a return to the Famicom Detective Club titles, and I know that they are like massively immersive when you get lost in them as detective stories. So there's a chance something like that takes it. Again, I think 7 Rebirth will take it. If you're talking a community vote, then way more people have played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and got through it than Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a great like way of telling a story, like mainly through collectibles and you're overhearing certain conversations and things. But yeah, I think in the spirit of getting back to something that we've played more of, although the best indie game is also full of stuff that is like quite wide-reaching as well. I have a feeling that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will take this. Like I said, even though personally I think Infinite Wealth, and we mentioned Kaiji Tang's performance before, but some really good heartfelt beats in there from him. And I love Ichiban Kasuga and Tanjiro Kamado from Demon Slayer are like these really great, genuinely just want to do right by people characters that it's so hard to write that.
Yeah.
And I think that when you actually do it well, you have to put like the weight into the character. And I think that that's what leads to like, it's good watching his story unfold and how much he goes through and everything else. But yeah, I think overall it'll probably be Final Fantasy. Best indie game, Animal Well, Arco, Balatro, Beyond Galaxyland, Conscript, Indica, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, Thank Goodness You're Here, The Plucky Squire, and Ultros.
Oi, how good of a category is that? That is a great selection.
Indie's always good, man.
Of games. I am torn between two. I haven't played them all, admittedly.
Hello.
It's Indica or Animal Well, and I'm trying to toss up which one I enjoyed more. I think Animal Well, with its many myriad surprises and its just technical accomplishments as a Metroidvania, I wouldn't mind if some would say I wouldn't mind to see that win. The only thing stopping me from picking Indica is that it was really wonky when it released on console. I don't know how it is now, but that definitely impacted my enjoyment of the game because the frame rate was really, really not great at times, and sometimes cutscenes were just really out of sync, which didn't help land the emotional beats. But if that game is firing on all cylinders, I'd probably give it to Indica just because it's definitely the most interesting game that came out this year. It's not for everyone, but it's got a unique sensibility that even the best indie games, I feel, can't quite match this year, but that's just me, Scott. What about you?
Indica does feel like it stands alone. And we mentioned 11-bit studios before. I was going to say, but I went on that massive point about devs, but like 11-bit studios going from things like This War of Mine to going all the way through, I think obviously they got Frostpunk and doing Indica, like they're doing so well from step to step to step, like as a studio. And I just have to assume it's been polished by now. Like a lot of the clips that have done the rounds were quite smooth, but I mean, maybe that's on a different, like a PC build or something. I'm going, Thank Goodness You're Here. I almost swore that. I fucking love that game. It's just so good. Like the developers as well, being called Coal Supper, being this representation of middle class England, like middle to lower class England, so relatable. Like me and you grew up through a lot of the towns that are represented here, a lot of the character tropes, the people tropes. There's just so much relatability that is in here that if you grew up in England, like especially in the northeast of England, or something that just isn't the south, like not to slag off the south, but it's a different feel.
No, episode 2 slag off this.
Screw you, South. It's there's just so much Englishness in here, and it's like a lovable, charming England, and it's like it's just so good. It's just so well put together. I think it's a series of environments that you're just sort of poking and prodding around. It's a point and click, but it doesn't come with the baggage of that genre. It's not going to leave you scratching your head going like, well, what the hell items do I need to combine to get more of the good writing? It's so good at maintaining that pace. You can pretty much do it in an afternoon. It's not a very long game, but it's just so funny, and it's just so well written. I just think, like I said, it's so charming, and I pretty much did it in one sitting. But yeah, I massively recommend Thank Goodness You're Here. I think in terms of a community vote, it might go to something more like Animal Well, because that's Donkey's game. Over from YouTube. Balatro, like we mentioned before, is so pristinely put together. The Plucky Squire is such a weird one. I bounced the F off that game, and I was looking forward to it for years.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to. That's why I didn't get around to it, because I thought it looked really cool as a concept, but everyone I talked to, you included, said, yeah, it's a great idea, but...
It's an absolutely gorgeous art style, and the idea of meshing together sort of like, 3D beat 'em up mechanics with certain puzzle mechanics and like things where you've got to put sentences together on screen to change what the reality is in front of you. It's cool, but it replays itself too many times in the opening. I've only played the first sort of 2-3 hours, but myself and Sai both bounced off it, and we were both really looking forward to it. Stunning art style though. I might go back to it at some point. I'd like to see all of it. But yeah, that game's been in production for like 3-4 years. It was a good long time. What do you think's actually going to take it?
Oh, I think you're right in terms of it being Animal Well or Balatro. I didn't think about the donkey connection, but that might sway it for Animal Well, and I think it's definitely deserved, even if it has that kind of groundswell or association with a big channel like Donkey. It's not a game that got 10 out of 10s just because of that. If anything, I think that might have even worked against it a little bit, because it's kind of a situation of, oh, okay, you want to do this, impress me then. And then they impressed us with Animal Well. So if that gets it, I would not be angry.
No, and I think something like an Indica has more of the conversation around it in terms of like the best. That should have been in best storytelling.
Yeah, I agree.
The storytelling category is a bit of a weird one, considering the range of stories being told this year that are not in that category. But
absolutely,
what can you do?
No, I fully agree. I was actually going to mention that before we moved on to this category. For my money, not to say it's better or worse than the other games in that category, because like I say, I've not played actually a good few of them. But Indica's storytelling, I think, makes it stand out, makes it such an interesting game. I think it won't win this just because it's a divisive game. A lot of people will just find it boring, find it too esoteric, might not vibe with its comedy or its writing. I think someone even messaged me saying, I bought Indica on your recommendation and it wasn't good. And I'm like, one, please, don't.
I'm sorry.
If I like something, don't. It's not necessarily a recommendation, I like it for my own reasons.
Right.
I always get stressed when people say I bought this because you recommended it. I'm like, oh, I recommended it for me.
Right.
If I've got the caveats, I'm like, oh god, that's a lot of pressure.
That's counterbalanced with the amount of people who have discovered Disco Elysium because of it. So
True.
it gets balanced out eventually.
True.
But I think like I said, the indie category is a nice spread this year, and I'll be happy for any of them to take it. My personal pick is Thank Goodness You're Here.
Yeah.
But we'll see. The last category is the most wanted game going forward. Now this is a big category in terms of the amount of nominations. Atomfall, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Sid Meier's Civilization 7, Claire Obscure, Expedition 33, Deadlock, Death Stranding 2, On the Beach, Doom the Dark Ages, Exodus, Fable, Ghost of Yotze, Grand Theft Auto 6, Hollow Knight Silksong, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Light No Fire, Mafia the Old Country, Monster Hunter Wilds, Skate, Slay the Spire 2, and South of Midnight. Obviously a handful of them still to come this year, like Indiana Jones. But this is a beautiful list.
That's an incredible
Trying to pick
selection.
one game from this is very hard.
Almost impossible. If
GTA 6 versus Death Stranding 2.
If all of these, Scott, drop over the next 12 months, we're either going to have the best year of our lives or the worst, depending on how much we want to get through and
trying to keep up with everything.
How much content we do in them. Yeah, for me, I think it is a dead heat. Between Grand Theft Auto 6 and Death Stranding 2.
Yep.
Probably.
I don't think that's a dead heat. GTA is dominating that thing.
Oh, I mean, in terms of my own picks.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah. Not until, I mean, GTA 6 is absolutely winning. No doubt that is definitely winning this category. But for me, I think it's Death Stranding 2 that I would love to see win because, you know me, I think Death Stranding 1 is one of the best games ever made at this point. I've dwelled on it for 5 years and I fully back that statement now. The people who get it. And I'm fascinated to see how they continue that story and that gameplay style, the stranded subgenre with a sequel. That said, I also think, I mean, GTA 6 is 100% running away with it, but if there's another game that might just edge it in terms of people who are ride or die for it, it's Hollow Knight Silksong, because that game was slated to come out actually a year or two ago.
Hollow Knight 1 was 2017.
Exactly, and we've not seen anything from Silksong for ages. Every single time there is a presentation or a conference from one of the big studios, all of the comments are like, is Silksong going to be here? Where is Silksong? So obviously, GTA 6 is a much bigger game, but and I include myself in this, and I say it lovingly, the die-hard Hollow Knight freaks out there, I think we'll be all over that.
I'm sure Team Cherry got out there and said that they were changing their plans for Silksong. It was initially meant to be a DLC for the first one, and then obviously the original one sold more and more and more, so they bulked it out. And it's a weird problem. It's a good problem to have, but it feels like what happened with Yacht Club and Shovel Knight, where the Shovel Knight came out in 2014. Obviously, they had Kickstarter backer goals to hit, and then the game kept selling, and they were like, okay, we'll do more story packs and more character packs, and so they never was as Shovel Knight 2. There was just add-ons for it for 10 years. Well, 6-7 years. And it's just one of those things where in Hollow Knight's case, if you're an indie who blows up and suddenly you have funding for all the ideas that you had at the beginning, it's super easy to then go, well, we can do everything and we might as well do everything because why not? And I think it's interesting to see how big Hollow Knight's gotten over the years and how much the hype is there for Silksong. A couple of things to touch on. You mentioned Death Stranding 2 before. I'm so curious what that is because that in itself was a game that was thrown out and script-wise and rebuilt according to Hideo Kojima based on the energies that came out of the pandemic, the conversations and the way that he thought it was going to go in terms of human relations and where we are now. And so I'm so curious what he has to say about what he's observed from around the world because he's been traveling a lot across the last few years, meeting up with loads of different facets of media and films and TV and everything. And so I'm curious about what that is. I wonder if he ever reveals what his original plan was. And then what that's turned into. I
don't know if you worry about this, and I don't necessarily, but I always think now, when he was making Death Stranding 1, it was, this is our new studio, obviously a lot of hurdles that come with that. This is our next big game. We're going to start releasing trailers before we even decide on which engine we're going to use. And now they're established, but it's not like they're established and they're going to just focus on Death Stranding. They've announced OD, they've announced Fizzant. They have so many irons in the fire. And one, I wonder, is anyone working on those other games right now? And if they are, how stretched thin is Hideo Kojima at this point? I hope it's not going to be the case where you don't feel his imprint on this. I can't imagine that ever happening. But it's interesting how much he's working on and how that guy still is flying around the world, like you said, meeting people, reviewing Venom online and the like. He's doing a lot. He's getting on. It's a testament to how much energy you can still have the older you get.
True, and I think he's a stickler for editing his own trailers, for getting hands on with the different parts of the studio. So I have to imagine he's a bit of a Rick Rubin, a bit of a Kevin Feige. Like he's dropping in, he's making sure the teams are on the right track, and then he's beaming off to do 10 other things before he gets back there next week. But it does seem like he's hands on with the project. It feels like Death Stranding's his baby. And I think OD is just like a weird thing that I think started as a Google Stadia project, became an Xbox project, and I think they just need to get that over the finish line at some point. But and then I think it'll be all energies on Fizzant because that's the cross-media project. I think it's a TV show, film. It seems like he wants that to be his magnum opus. Because like you said, he's getting on. It might be one of the last big projects that he puts his time into. I want to touch on Light No Fire. That's the follow-up from No Man's Sky. That's Hello Games' next big project.
Is it?
Which, it's weird the way that they've shown it off. Because No Man's Sky is humongous now. Just got another update across the last month or so. And they've never asked for any additional money. It's the same price, the same entry fee. You get one entrance fee, one price, and then you get, I think it's up to 14 different add-ons now. Light No Fire looks very similar. It being the same engine, but it looks very similar to where No Man's Sky is now at. But Light No Fire is this giant like all players are on the same planet thing, and everyone's trying to sort of like colonize and help each other, and it's almost like the building mechanics from Death Stranding put on one big planet, and you can have different countries and different populaces, and like it's a really cool idea. I'm curious to see how it comes out. It seems very similar to what Nintendo are working on. The supposedly secret Nintendo project that everyone's just leaked anyway, where they seem to be working on some sort of shared space thing as well, and I'm curious how that goes. Like Hello Games have earned their redemption multiple times over, but another press cycle with another big release. Like, I'm curious to see how that stuff goes and whether it gets received more warmly, considering that if we're talking about fandoms, the No Man's Sky fandom is like, oh my God, we are drowning in riches.
Yeah.
Like the Apology tour ended half a decade ago and they've just kept going. So other than The Last Campfire, that's the only other game that they've put out apart from working on No Man's Sky. So I'm curious to see how that thing lands in terms of the wider populace. I think it'll do very well, but I want to see what other hooks it has gameplay-wise that aren't in No Man's Sky, because they've added so much to that game. And also just lastly, things like, Doom, The Dark Ages and Ghost of Yotei, like they're still both meant to be coming next year. So it's like, they're massive updates to titles from years ago.
Big updates. Yeah, I forgot about Ghost of Yotei. How could I forget? That thing looks absolutely gorgeous. Like you said, a bag of riches for next year and beyond, Scott Telford at this moment in time. And that's even missing some, I think, like Judas, Ken Levine's next game, which may be coming next year. I don't know. It continues to be a mystery and an enigma.
Yes.
And I like the look of it. It's going to be fascinating to see his follow-up to BioShock, which just looks like
more BioShock.
Literally looks like he spent all this time talking about like making a different game, and then we saw the first trailers and it looked like BioShock, and it's what?
The more he's shown that off, the less I've been interested in it, because you've taken 11 years to do this. You've fractured Irrational Games. You formed a new studio. You talked about narrative building blocks, this whole sort of different way of getting through a game. And then, I don't know, we haven't seen that much. And what we have seen just looks like more BioShock. So I guess we'll see. My last thing is Skate. I want to see how Skate lands. It's been a long time since Skate 3. The title started as an extremely small project within EA. At some point, it seemed like it was going to be cancelled. It launched in this like early access, early beta thing. But I am subscribed to a lot of that stuff, so I have seen a lot of the updates for it. They pretty much launched a wire mesh that was controllable to be like, does anyone care about this? And then it's kept going. It feels like it's been grassroots from the ground up. But it's a weird project overall, because the bar you're trying to hit is just the one that was left behind 10 years ago from the ground up. So it's like, I don't know, like the Tony Hawk's games got cancelled, although Tony Hawk himself says he's still in talks with Activision about doing part 3, part 4. But I would just take more skating games.
Yeah, me too. I think I am at this point to ride or die Tony Hawk, to feel the real sort of fire around Skate again.
Oh, really?
I think it being announced so early when it was pretty much day zero of development, I think that, for me personally, took a little bit of wind out of the sails. They could, of course, get that back if they start the hype cycle up, if they start releasing gameplay that looks really smooth, if they get more, hands-on opportunities out there, be it demos or betas or what have you. I think it's cool that it's back. It's just, in this situation, it's kind of like being a FIFA or a PES guy. In this situation, I am a Tony Hawk's guy, and I think at this point I may always will be a Tony Hawk's guy. So if they announce Pro Skater 2, 3 and 4, Scott, remade and remastered, that'll be the one.
I wonder if that's what they're waiting for. It felt like when they announced Skate, it was in that conversation of like the remasters for Tony Hawk's 1 and 2, and it was EA going like, well, we should get on this. We have an IP that fits with that. And then obviously those games fell away. Activision didn't support the continued stuff. But yeah, the overall most wanted stuff. Your most wanted...
My most wanted is Death Stranding 2, for sure. It's not on this list, but I'm going to throw it in. Sam Barlow and Brandon Cronenberg's Blumhouse game that we know literally nothing about, but just those two creatives being attached is so tantalizing. And Grand Theft Auto 6, I cannot wait to see more of that. It's crazy that it was announced over a year ago at this point.
Yes.
Or coming up to a year.
God, yeah. The first trailer.
The first trailer. So
2024 is just melted.
Do you think that's dropping next year?
Well, the game itself?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with... that's weird, because oh, God, there were so many rumors that... I forget where that came from, that someone talked to one of the devs anonymously who just said, like, we might just dip on the release date. And they don't need to put it out. Like, you really don't
They really don't.
So I'll say yes, because I think it took them 10 years to then put the first trailer out, and that trailer was received so well. Are you more hesitant on it?
I don't know. I'm more hesitant. I just think it may slip just because while it has been, 11 years in development at this point, going on 12, I can just see it taking a few more months. They're not going to ship this thing if it is not what they want it to be. 2025, even though it will dominate, like they've already got releases lined up. If Take-Two and Rockstar have anything else up their sleeves, then they might drop those across the year. Obviously, they're not developing it, but they've got Max Payne 1 and 2, which is coming at some point in association with Remedy. I don't know, it's just so big that I wouldn't be surprised if it slips. That said, I don't think GTA 6 needs a long marketing tail on it. I think you can bash that thing out in 6 months, if not sooner, get people very excited with a more truncated hype cycle. Be like, here's the latest trailer, here's gameplay, here are pre-orders. It comes out in 4 or 5 months.
You don't even you don't need to do anything.
No.
Like, you could just say it's out now.
Yeah.
And it would be like Pokemon Go. The whole world would turn at once and run to the spot to get it. Like, it's GTA 6 that's going to dominate regardless. To run through all of our nominations, Ultimate Game of the Year, we both said Astro Bot. Best Game Adaptation, we're going to go with Fallout. Best Lead Performer, you went with Cody Christensen as Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I'm going to go with Kaiji Tang as Ichiban Kasuga, but I agree with you. I think it probably will be Cody. Studio of the Year, we didn't nail those down, but you didn't. I don't think so. Are you going 11-bit studios?
I'm gonna go Capcom.
I will join you with Capcom.
I think they'll win. I would quite like to see 11-bit win, but I think Capcom will win. Yeah.
Best storytelling, I'm going to go Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, but we'll see how that goes. Best indie game, you went with Animal Well. I went with Thank Goodness You're Here. And most wanted game, Death Stranding 2 On the Beach from you and Skate from me, but we both think GTA 6 will sweep.
Absolutely.
Because of course it will. But now this has been the What Culture Gaming Podcast. I've been your host, Scott Tilford, joined by Josh Brown.
Oh, that was a nice one, wasn't it?
That was a bloody lovely one. Continue having a bloody lovely one yourselves, and we'll catch you very soon.
Hey, Scott.
Hi.
Thank goodness you're here.
Thank goodness you're here.